Okay, so that's the recording started. Uh, the we'd love to have some interaction in this call. And there are various ways of doing that on Zoom. You can use the chat box. You can put your hand up using the reactions button in the toolbar, or simply, if you're comfortable with it, just speak. We'd love to hear from you. And I know Masood does not mind at all being interrupted at any point in the presentation. So yes, about 1 hour, I'll be sending out the video recording and the slides after the presentation is complete. The presentation is in 3 parts: catch up, solutions, and the future. So with that said, over to you, Masood.
Thank you very much, Angus. It's such a pleasure to be talking about this, I think, very, very important topical subject. You know, I want to just have a quick chat about where it all started. This all started with various discussions I was having with colleagues, including my co-author, Andrew Monroe, for the book, about our experience with the large companies or small companies and over the last few decades, and how well we are doing on or not doing on talent management. And this is you know, the sum of all those different ideas about why things have not gone the way that perhaps people had anticipated, and some of the practical solutions that I hope you will find useful in being able to meet the requirements for the future on the talent that your business will need. So that sort of sets the context. I am by inclination a historian. So I always take a historical view of these things. And I think most of the time, most societies and most places are still dealing with the old world. And most of the time, and I can certainly say this as a practicing HR director, we're playing catch up. We are very rarely thinking and going ahead of the curve and preparing in time. Intellectually, we get it. But in reality, most of the time, we are dealing with old world solutions to new world issues. And that is true of talent as is true of everything else. So first of all, I want to talk about this catch up as the first part of this presentation. Again, when we look at history, we find that the critical factor that created value was land, because the critical industry was agriculture. The more land you had, the more wealth you'd have, the more successful you and yours were. And for thousands and thousands of years, nations and individuals went to war over land. Land is no longer the critical element for future success. The second part we went to after Industrial Revolution was capital. It became the capitalist rather than the feudal agricultural society. The people with capital and investing that capital in a place that where it grew and generated income would create value and wealth. And we all became capitalists. Now, with the way that the world is going, the changes that we are seeing, whether in the information technology, in the knowledge economy, the reality is almost every aspect of business success, whether it's retaining your business and just, you know, surviving, growing your market, gaining market share, moving into other businesses, or even more significantly, starting a new venture, all of that is going to become is going to be essential for you to have the right people on board. Now, companies for years and years and years have been talking about how our people are our #1 assets. That's not changed. But the truth is that when you look at how much time a company was spending doing budgeting and looking at financial investment and how much time they were looking at talent investment, there was a massive mismatch. So the reality, which is often best illustrated by time, was not being realized. The reality was talent was not the most important factor that the leadership of a company was looking at. That's changing. That's changing rapidly because the realities are biting. The realities are that the people are the critical resource now, not just what we say. Then we look at actually what people are saying about their reality. Are they finding it easy? Are they finding it difficult? Most leaders say that talent and lack of talent, or the difficulty in recruiting people for the critical jobs, is one of the major things that keeps the decision makers awake at night. That is seriously important to them. And we look at that and say, what's going on? Why is there such a shortage of the critical talent? Whilst we look at global unemployment around the world and see a vast number of people who are making themselves available for work. I'll try and answer that question. But we are talking here about the difference between the unemployed versus the people who are employable based on the needs of the organization that are made into vacancies that people are able to fill. And a lot of this comes back to the kinds of tools that people are using. I don't know, how many of you have come across this before as an example? Just tell me anyone who hasn't seen this before.
Or just go to the reactions or go to the chat. Has anyone seen this potential
Or just say it.
performance? I mean, or say it, yeah.
Yeah, it's only 6 people other than us, so we can just talk about it. The reality is, this is everywhere. Almost every company I am aware of uses this. This came from an investment model, the Boston investment model, that looked at their portfolio. And, well, I'm glad that one person finds it new. Thank you, Akam. I mean, the reality is a lot of people see this before. And this was seen as the solution to our talent conundrum. We can't do everything for everyone. So how are we going to segment our people into pools and then come up with strategies that are targeted at those particular pools? And there is a assumption here, which is the value that someone is bringing to the business right now may not be the value that we see them bringing to the organization in future. So you have what they call the stars, which are the people who are currently high value, but high value for the future. We got rising stars, which are people who are maybe okay now, but we see them being more important in the future. And then we've got the backbone, which we used to call the workhorses or the cash cows or whatever way you want. And those are the people we want to retain and let them just do whatever they've always done, and so on and so forth. And if this was going to be the solution to our talent issue, then it would have been solved and people would have done it. Because what it allows you to do is to really think through, where do I put the investment for my talent? Where do I put the situation? And most big companies, I would say, did this. They said, okay, our senior people, they can add value right now. So whatever we invest in them, we get an immediate return and we get a high return because they have more impact. And the high potential is therefore long-term success, but right now we don't expect the short-term result. We expect a long-term result. Senior specialist, short-term return, no long-term investment. And in the middle, you got something like 90% of the people. And most companies went into self-service, went into, doing your own development or local development and so on and so forth. One of the issues that came up was that this predisposition with identifying talent as the top 5 or 10% high potentials or senior executives doesn't add up when you look at the mathematical impact of an improvement in performance that an investment has created. So say you got the top 5% of people who are on successions, who are the future, etc., and you improve their capability by 10%. How does that equate to 95% of your people's impact being improved by 1%? And who exactly is this talent? How do we know they're the talent? How do we know that they're, it would be sustainable and we would continue to believed that these people are a future of the organization. Perhaps it was to do with their relationship with their boss. Perhaps it was the project they were working on. How do you get somebody who is seen as a normal individual and you ignite them and they super perform? I've seen that time and again. There's a very famous saying that I like to repeat. I don't know who said it, but I think it's totally true. That says, if a flower is not blooming, you don't change the flower, you change the environment that the flower's in. And I've been in situations where, as an example, in a factory, the old line, we used to have a line in Saudi Arabia called the Millennium Line, because I mean, it'd been in place for over 85 years. And the people running it were seen as, you know, just let them carry on as they are. And we gave them attention. We put them through a Six Sigma program. And those people suddenly woke up and they were on fire. And they improved the performance of that line by a massive margin. And then they became the role models and the examples that we used to create that change in all the other lines within the factory. They were not people we'd identified as high potentials, but we ignited them and they became. So there is a lot to unpack here about exactly who is the talent and where are they and how do we manage it, and exactly where we should be putting the investment. And often in the last couple of decades, it's been all about the senior management and the high potential people with the label and not so much about everyone else. And that is possibly something that we should review. We also had, certainly within HR, this idea that you need to improve your talent management processes so that you become a more mature company in the way that you manage this talent. Often talent was owned by HR, and there were these HR orientated processes like appraisals, like the career management and succession planning, and they were all done in isolation, and it wasn't connected to the way you recruit people. It wasn't connected to the engagement. It wasn't connected to reward. It wasn't connected to the way leaders are taught to be leaders, and so on. And as things went on, you were supposed to create more standardization, improve the consistency, tailor it to those particular populations that we talked about, and make continuous improvement. Eventually, the idea was at the level 3, you'd have an integrated process, looking at end-to-end, looking at how you hire people right the way through to role movements and role changes, right the way through their careers, and ultimately a business-orientated talent strategy that delivers the business strategy through creating the capability the business needs to achieve its strategy. And it was seen that this level 4 is the ultimate aim that we should be going for. And more large companies made this journey. And if you look at how many people, say, according to this research in 2010, were making that journey in the US and UK alone, unfortunately, that's where I've got the figures for, you know, a lot of companies were making the journey up this chain, but very few making it to the ultimate strategic level. And the whole idea of this was that in due course, as you go up this chain, your promotion rate internally goes up, your level of engagement goes up, employee turnover goes down, and you have the talent you need in order to deliver your strategic objectives. And level 4 was the aim. And level 4 meant a lot of process, a lot of technology, and a lot of standardization. And that's what it was all about. And that is the story of the last few decades. But that all implies that you have the leaders who are able to make this happen rather than just pay lip service and go through the motions. Let's look at what happened. The idea of war for talent was coined by McKinsey in a report in the mid-80s. And they were promising that if people followed the example of the best practice, which is what I've just been showing you, that there would be something like a 22% higher return on shareholder value creation. And these best practice was used to drive a lot of these technologies that we've just been talking about. But with the benefit of hindsight, let's look at what happened to those companies that were in the best practice list. 33% have disappeared completely. 18% are still okay in the game, but can't say that they won this game. 16% are performing in a disappointing way, and 8% have been business disasters. Only 25% of the group that was seen as best practice said that they could prove a return on the investment they'd made. I would call that a disaster. I would call that a very fertile ground for learning, for what possibly we should do differently going into the future. And the expectations of our line managers. Because what is driving this? What is driving this is often the leadership that is absolutely critical to your talent strategy. I'm sure you've heard this before. People don't leave companies, they leave leaders. There's a study done a long time ago, admittedly, and I would be desperate for an updated version of this study, but I've been searching and searching, I can't find it anywhere. So if anyone's got any of these studies that looks at the same thing, please let me know. But this was conducted by the company that my co-author, Andrew Monroe, has been working with. And when he first showed this to me, I was absolutely shocked. And then when I reflected back on my own experience, my anecdotal experience, especially in large companies, I sort of thought, nah, it's probably true. These were leaders who were known and clearly understood to be bad leaders, poor leaders. And the critical one I want you to look at is what percentage of these bad leaders in a sample of 232 were dealt with. And according to this, 13.4% were the ones who were forced to leave. You look at the rest, only 6% were demoted. Nothing happened to the bad leader, 20%. 44.8% got promoted. So I'm going to ask you a question. When you are recruiting for a leader or when you're looking to place someone into a new role, what proportion of the decision is based on that person's technical capability, background, education, other previous role experiences? What proportion of that is based on their motives, their quality of leadership, the quality of teamwork? I was running a session on expat, and because clearly I've had a lot of experience moving people from country to country in the past, and you look at a study which I became aware of that looked at how a decision to move someone to another country, for example, is made. Now, we all know that moving countries is a huge learning experience and a huge risk. And something like nearly 60% of international moves fail to deliver the value that was intended. And you look at the reason for the failure, it's almost never technical capability of the individual. It is always that person's perspective, behavior, flexibility, ability to adapt, ability to lead in a multi-dimensional environment. But almost none of the companies were recruiting people or deciding who moves based on those factors. They were all deciding based on technical capability. And this is something which is left over for the last few decades and hasn't gone away. We're still looking at talent mainly as a technical person who's a high-performing technical person being put into a leadership position because of their technical capability. Some of the most mature companies have learned to start thinking about technical career ladders so that you don't force people into people management leadership jobs, people leadership jobs, when that's not their aptitude. But majority of the time is still the case that you take a highly valued technical person and you make them a terrible manager with a net negative impact. That's a multiplier based on the people below them. The other thing I will say to you is this. I have a lot of evidence, and I've done a lot of research in this in the companies that I've been involved with myself, that poor line managers bring poor line managers below them. in 75% of the time, people with poor leadership and managerial capability bring other people managers below them that are worse. Actually, the Hay Group model of a good leader is this umbrella model, which is, providing a climate which is more motivational, more effective below than what you receive from above. And that is something which is just not happening in most places. So we have a situation where we have tried a lot of technology, a lot of templates, a lot of systems and processes, mainly by HR, and it's not delivering the value that we expected. And if it's not delivering the value we expected for yesterday's needs, it's definitely not meeting the needs that are coming in the future. Can I just stop here for a second and just ask you guys, is this something that you guys see as well? Is this a reality that you recognize?
You can use, if you don't want to speak, please just use the chat function. A simple yes or no to the question would be a good start, I think, Masood, wouldn't it? Is this a reality that you recognize?
Is everybody with me on how I see things, or do you guys see things differently to this? Thank you, Gillian. Yeah. It's not good, is it? It's not what we expected, having spent millions. I mean, I alone, I have spent millions in talent development. And the reality is I've made these mistakes along with everyone else. I can sit here now and say, I'm the wise one and but at least I can say I learned my lessons. I can still see many people repeating those mistakes again. And these are mistakes I made. Put my hand up. I ran assessment centers for everybody, for everything. My God, we were doing nothing but assessment centers in some places I went to. So much technology, so much templates and rules and policies and methodologies. And here's another thing that HR often does, and I would need to take responsibility for this. We look at the situation and we say, what is the worst case scenario that the worst leader will do, the worst 5% of our organization? Now, let me come up with a policy, a rule, or a system to deal with that 5%. And what do we do with the 95% who are not doing that anyway, who are not doing those bad things? You piss them off, if you don't mind me saying, and you tie their hands and you make the organization slow and heavy. And this is what I'm talking about when I talk about catch-up. HR has not been a positive force here. HR, if anything, has contributed to where we are today in terms of the failure of many companies' strategic talent strategy. So, all very clever. What do we do about it? What is the solution? So, I'm going to be very honest with you and say, unlike most people who are trying to push books or sell consultancy or whatever else, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I've got a magic wand or I have a magic solution. Actually, it's this model I've developed or these words or whatever else. No, the reality is the basics of our requirement are still the same. What are your talent needs? How do you know what you're going to need in the future? How much? When? Where? Once you know your needs, how are you going to bring the right people on board that will meet that need? How are you going to develop them so they grow with you? And then, this is the most important, how do you make sure that having gone through the investment of recruitment and development, they deliver the values because they're engaged and they stay with you? We'll talk about the great resignation crisis that everyone is talking about later. But when you actually are going through all this and you have gone through all the effort and all the investment, all the time, all the money, when they leave you or when they don't deliver the value because they're not engaged, it's all for nothing. So there's a reason why the X is in red and why the X is in bigger thing, because X is what it says, it's a multiplier. More talent coming in is just an addition. More training is just addition. But without the engagement and retention, you don't get the multiplier effect. So let's start at the beginning, knowing what your needs are. Here's what normally happens. You look at your business strategy, you look at your talent needs, you say, okay, what do we have from a capability point of view? What are we going to need? Where's the gap? And at that point, most line managers, in my experience, will say, right, I had somebody leave, please just replace them like for like, exactly the same. Or they would say, okay, I've written this perfect model of everything I need today and tomorrow. Go recruit this person who is clearly more than I need right now. But I want to take no risks whatsoever. So I am going to push you in HR or whoever is the facilitator for this service to give me exactly what I need. Very few HR teams say every single time there's a gap, that's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to adjust your model. It's an opportunity for more efficiency. It's an opportunity for rethinking exactly what it is that we are doing, if it's still appropriate. So the question is, okay, you have this gap, I get it, and you would own that gap, so I'm not going to challenge it, you have the gap. How we meet it, is this permanent? Is this strategic? Are you always going to need it? In which case, yes, okay, we need to buy this person in. Is it temporary? Can we just, get a temporary solution? Bring in a consultant? Is this a need that's strategic to us? Can someone else meet this need cheaper, faster, better? Can we outsource it? Is it a need that we need to own and customize for ourselves, in which case we need to grow it ourselves? Or is this something that we can just buy? Is this a need where, frankly, another role could do this job? I could merge this with another job. Or I could rewrite that job into a different level of capability, different level of skill. How much time do we spend really thinking through what are we going to need and when? I tell you something, almost all the time when I've been doing budgeting, when line managers are putting headcount budgets in, they want that person at the beginning of the year, right? We need to recruit 250 people. Almost all of them need to be in January. Really? Yeah, the replacements can come through the year, but the new roles, I want them all now. None of these things that line managers automatically do stand up to scrutiny, in my opinion. And there is a need for much better way of planning how you close the gap. And that is number one. And unless you're tracking with a KPI exactly what is the expectation, what we call SLAs, the service level agreements for each one of these between HR and the line managers, or even with the line managers themselves, you're not going to be able to deliver it anyway. And very few people measure. In that planning, we are often going for default. And the default is full-time equivalent, exactly what I had before, or someone like me. Very few times are we thinking about alternative ways of meeting that need. And oftentimes we're talking about things, again, in a very old industrial revolution way of repeating the same thing again and again. Here's the job. At best, I will take the old job description and I will give it a quick read through and maybe tweak it a bit. Same job, same pay, same benefits, same conditions. Actually, what we want is looking at it from the other side, from the talent point of view. What am I going to gain coming into this? Where can I go after this job? What is this job going to give me? And what's it going to show me? What's it going to teach me? How will it feel to be here? Because whether we like it or not, when you're sending a contract to someone, there is an implied psychological contract behind it, which is, from the company point of view, is this person somebody who's going to be valuable to me right now and in the future, and that I would want to invest in long term? And from the employee point of view, is this company worth staying in? Do I feel connected to this company going forward? Or is it just the short term? I go back to Machiavelli. Machiavelli's advice in The Prince was, make sure you don't have over-reliance on mercenaries. a prince or king whose main army consists of mercenaries who are there for short term, who have a financial transactional relationship, cannot rely on them in times of difficulty. Those people will be there, then will be gone when better pay or better environment is offered to them elsewhere. I'm not saying you need everyone to be, willing to die for your company or whatever else, not at all. But you can't have the majority of your people being mercenaries. And thinking through, here's a job, here's how much it pays, and here's what I want you to do, and you do that, and that's our entire relationship, creates an implied psychological contract of a mercenary relationship. And then, who is talent? I've just took these statistics, which were incredibly shocking for me, on gender. I'm sure I could come up with very similar, if not worse, statistics when we talk about ethnicity, disability, and elsewhere. I've literally had CEOs tell me that I need to be recruiting more women, just so that in one sentence in the annual report, he could write that he increased the number of women in the organization by this percentage. The reality of it is that you talk about shortage of talent. You talk about the way that you can't recruit the people that you want. But there is huge opportunity in people who are very talented, very capable, but are not being considered for the job. One quick anecdote. I used to be head of recruitment many, many, many years ago for a large financial organization. And as part of my job, I was recruiting 250 graduates a year for a 2-year scheme to become branch managers. And during that time, they would need to pass qualifications, exams, whatever. And classically, this organization wanted a prestige program, which meant they were recruiting from the top universities. 3/4, if not more, were men from middle-class backgrounds who went to great universities, got very high degrees, and away they went. What happened was some of the other financial institutions who could see what a great scheme we had decided to target this pool of 500 and target them for the last 6 months of their time with us. So after they qualified and passed their financial services exams and were ready to be appointed. And we had a 30% turnover, having invested a huge amount of time and effort in these people. Classic example of what I was describing before. As head of recruitment, I looked at the role requirement. We did this huge amount of future-orientated job analysis about how it was changing, etc. And I realized that actually these highly arrogant, self-centered, maybe and not all of them, but a lot of them, these graduates who were coming from these great universities, probably were not needed. And I decided to target 2 other types of people who were in huge supply, but we were not going for. One was women returners who were returning to employment after having given birth to children. And 2 was people who didn't have a degree, who had HNDs or professional qualifications of other sorts. The amount of backlash I had immediately from people about diluting our brand, reducing the quality, whatever, was incredible, incredible. But the proof of the pudding is in the results. My God, our turnover went right down. So that alone saved us, and I'm talking 1980s, 1.3 million pounds was saved in the cost of turnover alone. Forget about that. The improvement in performance in the branches, the maturity of the people who were doing the leadership jobs, the improvement in the quality of the teamwork that these people brought with us. And the impact of these more mature women being recruited was huge. And I felt that again and again and again. Not one time in 37 years have I improved diversity and not seen financial benefits that are multiple of any cost that there might be. And yet, companies are still going after the same old. And people are recruiting still to type. Tall white males. Look at the CEOs. Look how many of the top CEOs are like that. Look how many of them are narcissists. Look at how many of them generating actual value for shareholders or for the company long term. There's a lot of research now that shows that that is exactly the wrong type. Now, I'm not saying that they're all bad, of course not, but diversity is not a politically correct thing. It's good for business, and it's proved. Here's a study that I had from McKinsey, basically showing the quality of business decision-making in an all-male environment, being 58% of decisions were correct. Then the average team was 66. Look how much improvement there is in the quality of business decision-making when you put diversity in there. Bain did another study, which I was desperately looking for to put into this slide, but I just couldn't find it. I've got it somewhere. And they showed the 35% improvement in EBITDA, in the bottom line, for companies that were not diverse, that were inclusive. Because diversity in itself is a hidden situation. I mean, I went into a company in Middle East many years ago as the VP, and I was told, don't worry about diversity. We already have 48 different nationalities. And then I realized that everyone in IT was from one village in one country. Everyone in finance one. All the maintenance people were Filipinos. All the line operators were Bangladeshis, and none of these people worked together. And the diversity didn't come through the line into the senior areas. It's not diversity. Diversity is the input. It's inclusiveness in decision making, inclusiveness in the operating of the company that brings value, but brings real business value. And this is the future. This isn't because I'm advocates for it because I feel that it's a good thing. I do. It's because it's good business and it's necessary for the future. It's where the opportunities are for future talent. The next is global versus local. My God, this is complicated. A lot of people, because of corporate responsibility, naturally want to have local talent. We work within this community. We need to be giving back to this community. And I'm all for that. You know, making links at a very young age with schools, creating internships, creating work experiences. It's a fantastic way of locking in talent and creating that pipeline. But there's also the global aspect. Many countries that currently have a younger population, highly educated population, have a huge surplus of talent. And looking globally, you have an opportunity to benefit from that. Many countries have localization programs that restrict that in a way. Lots of Middle Eastern countries, many, maybe even in other Western countries, are increasingly looking at giving advantage to their local people. And I understand that. But unless the local talent is competing with global talent, you're never building capability that's at the global standard. In Saudi Arabia, for example, during my time in Ojan Coca-Cola, we increased the localization for Saudi nationals from 18% to 24%, over 24% by the time I left. And this was never done by just recruiting people just to fill names and to put into boxes. No, these were really capable people. Many other companies did it other ways, but there is a minefield. What I'm saying is there is opportunities if you think outside the box. Gender, ethnicity, disabled, background differences, global versus local. These are all opportunities that most companies that think in very narrow way do not realize. Oops. And the other one is, let's look at generations. This has become quite a political thing. There's an awful lot of newspaper articles written about this. Others, you know, the lazy, you know, expecting millennials, Generation Z with a very low span of attention, and all this sensational, and almost always the stereotypes are negative. I've been working with people in these generations, and most of those stereotypes, like most stereotypes, are actually false. The other thing I want to say is there's never been a time in history where different generations haven't had to work together. It's always been like this. It's called aging. And people's requirements change through aging. So high risk takers who are young with little to lose, who are upgoing and innovative, whatever, versus the more traditional, more risk averse, older generation, whatever. I mean, this isn't new. People have been writing about this throughout history. And older generation talking about the younger generation being, oh my God, they're not like we were, you know, and they're not as good by definition. The younger generation talking about the fuddy-duddies who don't know what they're really looking at, and they don't understand the new technology, whatever, going forward. The reality is that, like everything else we've been talking about diversity, all these generations are needed for that diversity, and they all need to be feeling to be inclusive and part of the decision making. And that hasn't changed at all. Some of the things that have changed is, naturally, new technology is impacting on our businesses. And yes, the new generation grew up with it, are used to it. Those things are true. You look at some of the reasons why people leave, for example, you can see that the new generation clearly has a need to feel emotionally connected to the purpose of the company. That wasn't the case with what we used to call the wage slaves, maybe in baby bloomers, who, you know, were just there to do a hard work and do a great job. The expectation of the new generations are different. The reasons for resigning is very different. And you get these kind of nonsense, jokey stuff around, oh yeah, I want to get into doing some CEOing at some point in the future. But there is absolutely no evidence that the new generation is any worse as leaders, probably the opposite. And I work with young people all over the place, and the world is not that different. The younger generation want to claim it, and they have a role to play in our talent strategy. And there is a way of dealing with these things. I mean, it's not unusual. You could meet their needs, according to this research, by really focusing on the relationships. We talked about this. People don't leave companies, they leave bosses. So the personal relationship intensity of that is important. Continuous growth and re-education is important. Really focusing on the experience rather than the, you know, details of the job. You know, the whole, if you like, illusion of control, of I'm going to control this, as opposed to measuring output. Looking at the global, vision of the new generations versus the local. Building that loyalty continuously, rather than thinking in a short-term mercenary way that we talked about. And then retaining that person by constantly building their expectations and matching their expectation in terms of how their job is going to be. And not job, I think it's a calling. I like to think that I've been very lucky. I've done what is my calling. So I've never worked a day in my life. I've loved going to work, and almost I would do it for nothing, like this. So, you know, that's what the new generations say they want more of. A lot of the old generation used to think work has to be painful, has to be bad, has to be hard. Why? So I'm going to stop there. For your comments and for your input, the summarizing of the solutions for me is, don't do what you've always done. Think outside the box. Challenge some of those assumptions. What are we going to need, really? What is talent? How do I know? Where do I find them? How do I grow them? That is, unfortunately, not a sort of solution that says it's a magic wand, as I said. But in every case where companies have done that, and more startups with the young generation are actually doing some of these things, they get immediate benefits. What do you guys think? Any comments or observations?
While people are thinking, just a quick question, Masood. You mentioned looking at it from the other side. I think you said looking at it from the talent perspective. And I saw your little bit of research, the conclusions from, I think it was, is it Toolgan?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Are there any other people that are researching this and looking into it? Can we buy reports or get data on what talent is looking for?
To be honest with you, when I was looking at the new generation, there is no end of research. This is a very hot topic. Huge number of people are talking about the requirements of the new generation, and huge amount of research is happening. I'm very happy to share some of those if it's of interest. Absolutely. I will put some links in. Thank you, Amy. Very kind. So look, I know this is a difficult thing to say, but building quality into processes is what we're talking about here. It's not about new technology, new processes, new policies. It's about how we do it. That's what it is. So I want to just talk about the pandemic, because the pandemic, absolutely, diversity is a critical factor here. I was really interested in what happened during the pandemic, because for me, what the pandemic did wasn't to create a new situation, but it accelerated a lot of trends who were already there. And it did it because we were forced to confront the reality. The old leadership position of, okay, I'm going to control my team, and the team's reaction to that, which is, oh my God, I've got to be seen to be doing a good job, rather than actually doing a job, went out of the window, because we were forcing people to show value by working from home. The leadership had to be empathetic. We were all in it together in this difficult situation, had to trust the employees, because they couldn't actually see them. I'll come back to your question, Gillian, in a moment, if I just finish this slide first, if that's okay. So the line managers had to react to this remote working by focusing on the value that the people are delivering as an output, and being empathetic to their needs, by being open and honest and sharing ideas. I saw some really good leadership happening during this period in some quarters. And the organization had to coordinate all those diversity of different locations, different cultures, and they used technology effectively, and they learned and grew. This is the trend that we go on to follow, the trend of a leadership that's inclusive, that's about shared leadership. The leader is so confident, allows other people in the team to lead at different phases in a problem-solving situation, that thinks beyond the box, thinks globally, adheres to and loves the diversity of culture that they come, is technology savvy, and builds partnership and alliances rather than seeing everything as competition. So, that's what we're talking about here. Gillian's question.
Masood, I'm just going to read it out for everyone's benefit, and also for the recording just quickly. So agree with you 100%, but how to take traditional embedded processes within big companies and turn them on their ear, especially as it relates to career progression?
It's a fantastic question, because the reality is, Gillian, that a company that is not working well, where they've hit a barrier and there's a problem, is an easy company to convince. But a company that is making money hand over fist because they have a technology that no one can replicate, or they have a supply chain nobody can replicate, is a nightmare to deal with. I did a turnaround of a failing company in Netherlands many, many years ago. And this was a company that we acquired through acquisition of I think 8.5 billion euros acquisition of management, and we acquired this company in Netherlands. And this company was a great company, but it'd been losing money for 5 years. And we put 4 different CEOs in there, and they couldn't fix it. They just couldn't fix it. It was the culture, it was all kinds of things. And I went in with the 5th CEO. And the first question to ask everybody was, are you happy with things remaining as they are? Of course they weren't. And we brought in a massive change program, and we were very successful, hugely successful. And that company is still flying, and we gained market share, and we killed the competition. It was brilliant time. They asked me to go to our big neighbor next door to Germany, and to talk to the board of Germany, to talk to them about change management. And I went there, and of course, if you know telecom, they were all PhDs in engineering, whatever, her doctor this, her doctor that. And I told them the beautiful case study of Netherlands. And I was sharing with them the insights I had into Germany and how they could do it. And one of these gentlemen said to me, excuse me, Mr. Golshani? I said, yes. He said, do you know how much money we're making? Yes. Do you know what margin we're making? Yes. Do you know what our free cash flow is? Yes. Have you ever in history known a company that was making that much money, printing money, frankly, without worrying about anyone else coming in and replicating their USP, which is the network? Because nobody can build a network now. It's just not economical anymore. What exactly do we need to change? Look at Amazon. No competition. This is the Achilles heel of many of these big corporations. Their brands are so strong. Their products are so strong. The systems are so strong. They will not listen. And eventually, like everything else in this world, they will suffer and go. The smaller companies, the companies that are startups or companies where there is a genuine performance problem, you have a better fighting chance. Even with the big companies, my experience has always been, find a function that's ready for change. Take all these things and do them in that function. Show the benefits and the results you have, and the rest of the company will then open their ears to you, and you start to go. You need to go along where the door is open, where the willingness to change has been created before you push the solutions. No one likes to listen to solutions if they haven't bought into the need to change. That's just basic change management, in my opinion. I hope that answered your question. It's not easy. You're absolutely correct.
I guess either a function, Masood, or perhaps a region within the company that's underperforming the rest of the company.
Absolutely. I went into a company once and the CEO said to me, I know you and know your reputation. Frankly, I don't need any HR initiatives. I got bigger fish to fry. Leave me alone. And I found one function that where the leader and the situation needed my help. And I went in there and I worked in there for 3 months. And then we went to the board and we presented our results. And the rest of the board said, oh my God, why aren't we doing this for everyone? And the CEO was convinced. The CEO is a human being like everyone else. I mean, we always talk about change being top down. I always say, no, you got to look at it as going horizontally across the structure. You can't go top down. Sometimes the CEO will take longer to be convinced than maybe some of the people below them. And yes, if you have the CEO on board, of course, it's much better. No doubt about it. But the reality is that change moving horizontally through the organization is the optimum way, rather than just coming down the hierarchy. That's a different subject about change management, but it's totally relevant to this situation, Gillian. Absolutely excellent question. So to summarize, a lot of people focus on what we call, this is from the McKinsey 7 S's, a very old model, that we're looking at the hard S's, the strategy, the structure, the systems, the processes. And we buy new tools, new systems, we create new structures, new policies, and we build it into our structure and into our strategy. My experience is that's not where the failure has been. The failure has been in what they often call the soft S's, which I don't think are soft at all. These are the hard things to do. That's why they haven't happened. It's about focusing on the quality of your line managers and leaders who are capable of recognizing talent and bringing it on board and developing it. Creating the right culture for that talent to want to belong and stay. Building capability and skill, and having a strategy about how to build the gap in capability, bringing the right people and retaining them and igniting them with energy. All the reasons why things have failed in the past and all the things we need to focus on in the future is not in the templates and the systems and the hard, it's all in the how. It's putting quality into it. Let's just talk about what quality means. So if you want, in my opinion, this is the summary of, the point of this presentation. If you want to win the war on talent in the future and have the talent you need to drive your business strategy, first, it's got to be real. None of this nonsense, posters on the wall, our brand, this is what our employer brand is and da. It's got to be real. Yes, 25% aspirational, which is the next step we want to go to. But what an employee says to their cousin, their brother, whoever else who's thinking of joining your company, that's real. What you tell them they need to be expecting, that's not real. Second thing is, and I think we all recognize this, diversity and flexibility of employment, and I go beyond diversity, inclusiveness in the way leadership manages and makes decisions is not a nice to have anymore. Is absolutely essential. And you create experiences for people rather than a job. They are enjoying that experience. They are feeling proud of that experience, rather than tick, I've done that job, and that job title, by the way. The line managers have to own it. It can't be driven by HR. If it's driven by HR, something's gone wrong. HR has a role to play, not as owner of talent management, as facilitator. The owner is the line managers. And unless you have a psychological contract with the people that's open and honest and builds trust, you can forget about it. All of this comes from authenticity. Being real with people. You know, we're in this journey together. We're all aligned. We're all going to win together if the company wins. And while you're with us, I will treat you as a member of the family that we're journeying with. That's it. Very simple. Any company that deals with their talent as a resource, I mean, the word HR, human resource, and therefore I'm going to exploit this resource to the maximum, will get back a mercenary mentality from the talent, which means that they will jump the moment that there is an opportunity that's better elsewhere, and they will exploit the company back. An exploitative culture where all that's important is short-term money and return will undoubtedly result in a talent strategy failure. Unless your talent strategy is, we don't care about talent, we're going to buy it in, pay through the nose, whether it's appropriate for us or not, take all those risks, and we generally don't care about people. And there are companies like that I've come across where people are an inconvenience. I wish we didn't have people and there was just a button that we could switch on and off for our company to operate. Most companies and most future industries and companies are not like that. They are going to require people who are the right people, who are engaged and involved with you right the way through, because you don't know where the threat is coming from. You don't know what the solution is going to be. The need for managing chaos and chaotic change, unpredictable change in the future, where small things have huge impact, means you need people who are with you to make it happen. Look at the pandemic. What really made companies survive and thrive through the pandemic wasn't their systems, wasn't their structure, it was their people. 100%. It's not going to change. And my last message to you, if in all of this, you keep your people in the dark, they'll start looking for an exit. You need to share and be open to their perspective to take things forward together. And that's my message. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Masood. Let's take some questions. I think we're just over the top of the hour, so a little after what we said. But thank you very much for that, Masood. Let's see if there are any questions. You're welcome to write in the chat box or just simply speak.
Even better, just speak.
Yeah. While people are thinking, here's one, Masood. The 5 points that you mentioned in, I think, the next to last slide. Are there any exemplars, companies out there that are doing really well with this that we can go and look at?
Sure. Look, there in the book, in fact, there's 2 books, but the first one has already been published. We have an awful lot of examples and anecdotes and research, a lot. You know, I would urge people to just have a look in there, because for every subject, I mean, there's 54 different chapters, each one dealing with a different aspect. There will be research, there'll be examples, positive and negative, that we could learn from going forward. Many of the companies that I find are exemplars are often startups nowadays, and often family-owned businesses where the leader, the owner, if you like, has taken the talent as a member of the family under the wing, and they have really been able to get the rewards that attitude brings.
Yeah, that leads me on to my next question, and I don't see any questions coming up, so I'll ask this one. Of course, human capital was the way we spoke about this, the language we use, and I hear people now talking about emotional capital. What does that mean, and what are people doing with emotional capital?
Yeah, and more companies are now recognizing that where they're putting on their balance sheet a brand goodwill that says our brand's value, whether it's Coca-Cola, Apple, whatever else it might be, this is the value. They need to also put in the balance sheet on the asset side, the emotional capital that their employees bring. So supposing you wanted to go and buy a company, one of the due diligence questions often is, how long have your people been with you? How many of them got promoted recently? How many of them are super performers? All of these things are indicative of the value of the asset that you want to acquire. Why would that be different to share price? Why would that be different to any other measure of a company's innate value? That emotional capital is often completely ignored. Very few companies are doing it, but some of the top companies are not doing it. I believe Google does it, for example. And even countries are becoming more adhered to that. I don't know whether you've heard about the happiness index and others that many countries are now using. And that will trickle down to companies. And what do we mean by happiness index? Does it mean, I mean, the individual is happy where they are. They're enjoying the experience. They're with you for the journey, whether there are bumps on the road or not.
Yeah, part of that journey is creating the language and the metrics and the measurement, and that's all to be done, or a lot of it, I would imagine.
Absolutely.
So I'm having a look over. I don't see any other questions. So I think if that's the case, we did run over a little, but it was a great discussion, and we certainly didn't want to cut it off. But I think we'll end it there. Thank you so much, Masood, for giving us the benefit of your insights. Good luck with the book sales. One more plug.
Thank you very much, Angus.
And
thank you guys for joining.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining. Great to see you here. I haven't fixed the next webinar, but of course, as soon as we do, we'll let you know. Thanks so much. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.